Hey everyone, it's Louise and welcome back to Along Came Mama. I know it's been such a long time since I've been on this channel. If you haven't been following my socials, I had a third kid. Yes, three under three. Yeah, she's actually sleeping back there. A lot has happened for sure. Her name is Lake. I had her about 6 months ago now, so I felt like it was an appropriate time, a good amount of time to talk about her birth story. Now, for those of you who didn't know, this one was one for the books. So long story short, I basically gave birth to her all by myself in this bed actually. I was home alone, no medical assistance, no husband, no kids, nobody in attendance but me and baby Lake. But if you want the long version of the story, stick around because it's a doozy. This birth story is gonna be all over the place. Just a warning, mom brain, still here. Okay, so where do I begin? So pretty much at this point, I'm already on mat leave. I'm at home nesting, pretty much just laying around, just being a starfish. So baby girl's due date was September 1st. And at this point, it's Monday, August 21st. Anyway, so pretty much it's a Monday and I was supposed to have an OB appointment the next day on the Tuesday because that's when all the clinics are. And I remember my last appointment telling them I wanted a sweep because I know it's so silly, but I already have a September baby. I didn't want another September baby, so I was like, I want to have an August baby this time. But basically I was like, my next appointment, I want to have a sweep so that, you know, baby comes like that. So on the Monday, I'm having contractions. They're painful, but they're bearable. And I'm like using my contraction timer and you know, it's not the 511 yet. So I was just like, you know, I'm gonna wait because I have an appointment the next day. I'm just gonna wait it out. So Tuesday comes along, I have my appointment. I feel better, like I'm not having like contractions. So I go into my appointment, I tell them I was having contractions the day before and they were like, you know, that's normal. I knew it was normal. It's my third pregnancy. But pretty much they asked me if I still want to go through with the sweep. I was like, you know, I think I need some more time. So I'm not gonna have the sweep just yet, but can you just tell me how far along I am? So doctor gives me an examination down there and she says I'm about 2 centimeters dilated. I'm like, okay, so there's progress. And I was like, is that good? Does that mean it's gonna happen soon? Like, I wanted her opinion. So she was like, you know, sometimes people stay at 2 centimeters for like weeks. And I'm like, oh fuck, okay, whatever. I'm gonna go home, wait it out. So that evening, I was fine. I had like no contractions. That was great. The following morning, I remember being waken up at around like 7:15, having like a back pain, just like pain in my back. So I was like, okay, I'm having contractions again. I started timing them again. The contractions are getting stronger, but it's still not at the 511 mark. So I just kept timing it. You know, I'm just in bed the whole day. The kids are at daycare. Harold's working from home at this point. He has like meetings. There's like a conference, whatever. So I was like, just leave me be. I just want to rest. So I did. But at a certain point, it did reach that 511 mark. So I was like panicking and I was like, the kids are at daycare, then I have to bring them to my parents' house, which is in Markham. And if you're not familiar with the geography of like the greater Toronto area, like Markham is about like an hour away from Toronto in like good traffic. So I go on my hospital website because I'm in denial. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna have the baby yet because like things aren't aligned yet. So I go on my hospital website and they say instead of the contractions happening for 1 hour, wait 2 hours. I was like, easy peasy. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna wait the 2 hours. I'm good. It hasn't been super consistent for the 1 hour. So I continue resting. Try to take a nap, but I'm waking up by these contractions. And at a certain point I was like, okay, so like if it happens and we have to get the kids from daycare, bring them to my parents, like are they meeting us at the hospital? Are they meeting us at daycare? Then we have to like do the car seat thing and then they have to drive there. It was just a lot. So at that point I was like, you know, Harold, like I feel like it's gonna happen soon. So I think you should go. I think you should get the kids while it's not crazy, while my contractions are at bay, you know. At that point they weren't super wild. As I said, they weren't super consistent. It did reach that like 1 hour point, but then it slowed down a little bit. So I was like, go now while it's not so intense. And then by the time you come back, then we'll be a bit more prepared for when it does happen because I feel like it's gonna happen soon. He tells his boss, he's like, you know, I think my wife's in labor, so I'm gonna have to like dip. He went, got the kids, brought them to my parents, yada, 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 does his thing. But meanwhile, while I'm here in this bed, the contractions intensify, like intensify. But once again, I'm in denial. Like, I'm like, no, this is not happening. Not right now. Not when Harold's not here. Not on this bed. No. This whole time I'm just like squirming, I'm uncomfortable, I'm like changing positions, just gonna like wait it out. Because at this point, for him to go get the kids from daycare to my parents and back here, that's at least 2 hours. So in my head, all I'm thinking about is he's on his way back. He's coming, he's gonna be here. That was just like my way of calming myself down, knowing that I was like in a really crappy situation. But anyway, back to the contractions. So they were really bad. And at that point, it was reaching like the 2 hour mark. So I was like, okay, it might happen. Something's happening. At that point, it did reach the 2 hour point of my contractions being very consistent, 5 minutes apart, lasting, can't talk through them. But once again, still in denial. So I was like, I'm gonna wait till my water breaks because that's when I know something's happening. So this whole time, still in this bed, still squirming around, trying to change positions, and lo and behold, my water breaks. So I'm like starting to feel like pressure down there, and I already know from experience, like when you start to feel pressure, like you have to go poop, that's when you know like you're ready to push. Did not want to think that was happening. So I just kept going to the washroom. I'm like, maybe I have to pee. There's like so much pressure down there. Maybe I have to poop. So I tried doing that and like nothing came out. It was like, I was just so uncomfortable. And then I came back here like one final time from coming from the washroom. And I remember just being so uncomfortable. I got on all fours and then I heard this like slurping sound. It was like nothing I've ever heard, or at least remembered hearing during my labor. I heard the slurping sound and I was like, what the hell was that? I started to feel so much pressure. I felt like I was being ripped in two. So then I'm like, okay, my water had broke. I'm in immense pain. I need to know where the hell Harold is. Mind you, I'm not calling him this whole time because like I knew he wasn't like here and I didn't want to stress myself out thinking about like where he is, or like, you know, I don't want to stress him out neither. And I also couldn't talk through my contractions. Like they were real contractions. So anyway, I decide to call him and I'm just like, hey, where are you at? And then he told me he was about like 10-15 minutes away. In my head, I'm just like, not too far, still kind of far, but not like impossibly far. So I felt like a little bit better about it. So I was like, okay, because like when you get here, we are going. Like we have to go. My water just broke and we're going. And he was like, okay. Like I know he's already stressing. So I hang up and I was thinking about like, okay, so if I have to go to the hospital, I have to like walk. First of all, I'm already in so much pain. I have to walk, get into the car, to sit like really, really uncomfortably in the car all the way to Mount Sinai during rush hour traffic. This is like after work. This was around like maybe 5:45, 6-ish, around that time. Already the thought in my head, I'm like, you go up the elevator, they put me on like a wheelchair, they have to like put an IV, and I was just like so stressed out about the whole situation, about getting to the hospital. So as soon as I hang up on the phone with him, I called 911, which I know I should have done a long time ago. So I call 911 and right when the operator answers the phone, I have the biggest contraction ever. Mind you, this whole time I'm screaming. Like my neighbors probably think I'm like getting murdered, but they're also jerks because they didn't call the cops, because if I was getting murdered, I'd be dead, but that's another story. So she answers the phone and she's like, ma'am, what's your name? Where's your address? I told her my address like 3 times and each time she's like, what's the buzz? Is there a buzzer to get in? What's the... And I'm like, oh my God, can't you track me? Isn't there like satellites everywhere you could ping where I actually am? I was so annoyed. I'm like so dramatic. I'm like, I'm gonna die. And she was like, stay with me, ma'am. Ma'am, stay with me. I thought that was really funny. Anyway, she's getting this information from me. About like 2 minutes into the phone call, I'm having this baby. So I'm like screaming, I'm like, I'm giving birth. I push once and I like start to feel down there and I'm like, oh my God, that's a baby's head. You know, you can't hold in a baby. I just had to keep going. So I pushed again and then the baby came out. And I tell people that like the baby rolled out like a Pokemon, like a little tumble. And I was like, what is that? Because you know, when babies are born, they're like really hairy. So then I tried to hold the baby and the baby wasn't crying. So I was like panicking. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. How am I here? Like, how am I at home giving birth? Like, this is so irresponsible. So I'm like freaking out. Oh my God, the baby's not crying. I'm like telling the operator on the phone, baby's not crying. And then I flip the baby over and the baby just starts crying. And I'm like, okay, the baby is crying. And then I felt like so much relief. The funny thing is that we didn't find out the sex of the baby. Like, we didn't want to find out. You know, we already had a boy and a girl, so we were just like, whatever we have this time around, it's just gravy. We're happy with whatever we have. So I'm just holding the baby beside me, and I'm just like, wait, I don't even know what the sex of the baby is. So I lift up and I'm like, it's a girl. It was like very like Lion King-y. And then the operator's like, do you have any clean clothes around you? And we had just done laundry the night before. So I had like some of the kids' clothes. So I put like a shirt on her back, a shirt on her head, so the baby like wouldn't get cold. And then she tried to get me to like cut the umbilical cord somehow. And I'm like, I don't know. But the last time I checked, I'm not a doctor. But she was like, do you have some thread, like a loose thread around you? I'm like, no. And then she was like, do you have some dental floss? And I'm like, I'm in my bed, bro. Like, where am I getting dental floss? And then she was like, do you have a bra strap? And I'm like, no, I'm at home. I did not expect to go anywhere. I'm not wearing a bra. And this whole time, mind you, there's firefighters trying to like break down our door because obviously they're trying to get in. And I'm like trying to call Harold because I'm just like, I need to know where the hell you're at because you said you'd be here in 10-15 minutes. So I'm like trying to three-way him while I'm on the phone with like 911. I was like, I'm trying to get a hold of my husband. And I didn't know you couldn't three-way while you're on the phone with 911. And then she's like, why are you trying to call him? I'm like, bitch, I just gave birth. But I was really just trying to figure out where he was. So she was like, okay, give me his number. I'll get my colleague to call him. So I gave them his number. The colleague gets him right away and he's like, I just parked. And she's like, he just parked. I'm like, okay, great. So can you tell the firefighters to stop trying to break down our door? Because the last thing I want to think of while I'm in the hospital with our newborn is someone breaking into our apartment because we don't have a lock. So anyway, she gets the firefighters and they're like, stop breaking down our door. Obviously, they're still trying to do it because it's an emergency. But thankfully, Harold had just parked up. Based on his retelling of the story, is he runs up the elevator, sees the firefighters at the door, trying to like break it with like one of those things. They're called. Basically break into our apartment. And he's like, no, I live here. And he unlocks the door, but it's stuck because they were wedging it open. And he tells me that he kicked open the door and let the firefighters in. The funny thing is, or embarrassing, I don't know. Embarrassing part is I'm on this bed. I'm like laying like right there. And I'm like wearing a white, just like whatever, home shirt soaked in blood, first of all. I didn't have any underwear because as soon as I felt like the baby coming, I like ripped it out and I'm just like, this is just gotta go. And I have this placenta in between my legs because after like push the baby out, I remembered that I had to give birth to the placenta too. So anyway, I'm like legs wide open with like a placenta in between me and a baby on the side. The firefighters all come in and they're all men. I'm sure I traumatized them for life. They probably need to go to therapy after. So they come in and then Harold comes in after them. I'm like, oh, thank God. And then he just looks around and he looks so puzzled. And I'm just like, I gave birth. He tells me he had no idea what was happening. He wasn't even registering that there was a baby beside me. He was like, oh my God. And I can tell in his eyes that he was just so like shocked and he had no words. He was literally speechless and concerned. I can see the concern in his eyes. He's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. So then the firefighters are checking the baby and they're like, oh, she's got good color, breathing well, blah, blah, blah. They clamp the umbilical cord, Harold cuts it. Thankfully, not too long after that, the paramedics come in and they're women. So they're like, we'll take it from here. So the firefighters exit, then the paramedics were just like very helpful. They continued the examination of the baby, reiterated that she looked great. I looked fine. And then they asked me which hospital I was planning to give birth at. And I said Mount Sinai. And they asked me if there was like a specific reason why I had to go there. They were probably wondering if I was like high risk or something. But I was just like, no, that was pretty much just where my other two kids were born. So they were like, okay, so we're going to take you to St. Joe's Hospital because it's much closer. So then they brought the stretcher over and then I'm like, how am I supposed to get on that? And then they're like, however you feel comfortable. So I was just like, okay. Mind you, I still have like zero pants on. They put like the placenta in a bag. So like a plastic like biohazard bag. Gross. Anyway, so they load me on a stretcher and then they ask if they wanted the baby with me or if the next option would be to like have the baby with Harold. And I was like, no, baby with me is totally fine. So they put the baby on my chest and they strap me in. Like our apartment's not big, but they somehow got me out of there. So I go down, load me in an ambulance. It's like my first time ever in an ambulance. And one thing I didn't know that they did is that they literally don't stop for anything. So every speed bump, like they just ran through it. I guess because like you're in an emergency, no time to stop. So anyway, every time they ran over a speed bump, I had like lake on my chest and it was like, huh. I was like airborne. So we get to the hospital. Thankfully, their birthing unit is on the main floor. So they bring me in, and the first thing I asked them was, can we have a private room? Because every other birth that I had at Mount Sinai, I guess, was always busy. I've always had a semi-private room. But this time around, I was like, this is my last baby. Please, do you have a private room? And thankfully they did. So we got in there. Once again, they examined me. I had to get stitched up. They took like my blood just to make sure everything was good. Thankfully, I didn't have to have like an IV or anything. But pretty much as soon as like everything dwindled down, the first thing I wanted to do was call my parents, because I thought it would just be so funny if we FaceTimed them and we had a baby, because no one knew I was in labor. Like nobody knew. So I was like holding Lake, we were in our room, and then Harold FaceTimes my parents. They probably thought we were just trying to say goodnight to the kids, and we were just like, hi. And my mom was like, oh my God. Hunter and Lonnie saw Lake for the first time, but I think they were confused. They were just like, who is that? You better not be bringing that home. But pretty much after all that, it was a good labor, minus the pain, obviously. But I mean, everything turned out so great. Like I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. She was so healthy. I was healthy. No complications, thankfully. Everything just really aligned. Everyone's timing was perfect. I'm just really grateful how everything turned out despite everything. But you want to hear something funny? So that same morning that I was in this bed, Harold was like, would you ever have a home birth? And I was like, hell no. I'm like, I would never, ever, 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 ever have a home birth. It's like not in my plans, not in like my wildest dreams, never. Then at another point in the morning, he was like, hey, do you think we should put down like some garbage bags or something just in case like your water breaks on the bed? And I was like, no, like don't worry about it. That's not gonna happen. It's like he saw into the future or something. But yeah, some of you had some questions, and the ones that I didn't cover in my birth story already, I'm gonna answer. One of them was, were there signs that I missed about, you know, being in labor? Clearly, yes. There were signs, and as I said, I was in like huge denial that I was in labor, because I really just didn't want to give birth in this bed. But please don't ignore the 511 rule. If you don't know it, look it up. Some people use 411. My hospital uses 511. It's pretty much the same thing. And especially if it's like not your first baby, just really abide by that. Take your contractions very seriously. Another question was, how did I know what to do? Did I have like a maternal instinct? I'd like to say yes, because this isn't my first time giving birth. I remember with my first birth with Hunter, like I felt that pressure of like having to poop. So at that point, I already knew that it was sort of time to push. And also after giving birth, I know that like the placenta has to come out somehow. That's something I remembered from both of my other births. So after I pushed out Lake, I knew that this placenta had to get out of there somehow. So I had to focus in my brain and had to push it out whenever I felt that next contraction, because you know, there are contractions after you give birth. I guess everything was just like muscle memory, or I guess just me just focusing and remembering what had happened in the hospital. And thankfully it wasn't too frantic, that I sort of knew what to do. Another question was, what happened to the bed? Well, well, the bed was disgusting. Like it literally looked like a murder took place on the bed. But after Harold saw me on there and he saw the condition of the bed, I jokingly was like, okay, you got to get me a bed as a push present now. And he was like, absolutely. So the night I gave birth, Harold actually went back home, cleaned everything up. He couldn't throw out the mattress because we still had to come back the following night. So he put garbage bags down, he put a new fresh bed sheet on, threw out the old one obviously, and just made sure everything was tidy for when I came back, which was very appreciated. And then the following evening, we were supposed to go to my parents' house, but it was already so late. And by the time we got home and showered and got everything ready, it was just gonna be too late to drive up to my parents' house and pretty much just sleep there for the evening. So we actually stayed here one night and slept on the bloody mattress. But once again, there were garbage bags on it, like a new bed sheet. So it wasn't totally gross. There was still a smell, and I can feel like the garbage bags underneath, but it could have been worse. And then of course, like we did with the other newborns, we stayed 2 weeks at my parents' house. So while we were there, Harold was ordering a bed to get delivered to our place. It arrived like the following day. It was like the weekend, and Harold went back home, set up the new bed, threw out the old one. And if you ask him how he did it, he like folded it in half and then taped it around and then like went down to the garbage dump and just dumped it in. Thankfully, we live in an apartment, so it didn't have to like sit out on a curb until garbage day or something. I just feel sorry for whoever had to encounter that. I guess another like general question people had was how I felt after, like how I felt in the moment. Like, was I scared, nervous, anxious? Yes, like of course I was all of the above, but I tell Harold this all the time. I was like, if you were here with me, I think I would have been more stressed and anxious because you would have been asking me what to do. And because I was alone, I was able to like focus and like tap into my brain and tap into my memory about what happened with my previous birth. So even if I was alone, I feel like it was better because I was able to focus more. And I also feel like for his sake, it was better that he wasn't there neither. But truly, after I gave birth, I just felt like invincible. Of course, it was really painful and such a traumatic experience, but at the same time, I just felt really invigorated after. Like, I've never had a natural birth neither, like natural unmedicated birth. So for me to experience that from like start to finish was so surreal. I felt really accomplished. You know, I likened it to like having a really good sneeze. You know, when you let it out and you're just like, oh, that felt so good. But still, like, I still would not recommend an unplanned home birth for various reasons too, because honestly, getting her birth certificate is such a nightmare. She's almost 6 months right now and I still don't have it. But that's a story for another day. Oh, another question I always get asked is, more babies? Hell no. That's like a strong hell no. I only ever wanted 3 babies max. Don't want to drive a van. Maybe a nice like big SUV with an extra row or something, but no, I don't want no van. I think like 3's enough. No more. Absolutely no more. So I think that pretty much answers all the questions. I think that pretty much sums up my wild birth story. If I missed anything or if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But other than that, thanks for tuning in. I hope to have some more videos for you on the horizon, but I can't make any promises. So if not, I'm just gonna sign off here. Once again, thank you for tuning in. You can like, subscribe, comment, share, save, whatever. But if you want to continue following along my adventures, you can still follow on Instagram, alongcamemama. Thanks for watching and see you soon.